Mainland live poultry imports banned for 4 more months. A dozen people injured after a Cathay Pacific plane hits turbulence, and a police officer among 4 killed in renewed clashes in Bangkok.
Good evening. The sale of live poultry will resume tomorrow after a 3-week ban because of the threat of bird flu. But a ban on the import of live mainland poultry is being put in place for 4 months. As Rani Samtani reports, some members of the local chicken trade are not happy with that announcement.
To prevent the spread of bird flu, the government has decided to stop the import of live poultry from the mainland for 4 months. The announcement comes amid efforts to separate local and mainland poultry to prevent cross-contamination.
In view of the requests from the general public and the live poultry trade, the government is identifying suitable sites for the separate holding of imported and local live poultry while test results are awaiting. As the establishment of such facilities will take time, the government has decided to suspend the import of live poultry for slaughter and consumption. The import of day-old chick as well as chilled or frozen poultry product will not be affected.
40% of the territory's live chickens come from the mainland. Meanwhile, the 21-day ban on live poultry sales at local markets will end at midnight tonight. That means fresh local poultry will be available from tomorrow. And the Cheung temporary wholesale poultry market will resume operation. But a group of wholesalers and vendors expressed concern that a ban on mainland poultry would drive up prices here, and they say that would affect their business. Today, they staged a protest outside the Cheung market. A trade association will decide tomorrow whether to go on strike in protest of the ban. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
The government has decided to keep the charges at the 3 cross-harbor tunnels unchanged. This follows a 4-year study on how to even out the tunnel's traffic flow to ease congestion. As Jenny Lam reports, the government will wait another 3 years before deciding what to do next.
You only need to experience what it's like inching forward through the cross-harbour tunnel to understand why the government thought something should be done to divert some of the vehicles to the Eastern Harbour Tunnel. That's what it set out to do 4 years ago, but it has decided to do nothing for now.
There is some support for our original proposal to reduce charges for the Eastern Harbour Tunnel and to increase charges for this cross-harbour tunnel. There is equally great concern among the local communities about the traffic situation, the overall traffic situation in the eastern part of Hong Kong and also Kwun Tong.
And since there is no consensus, the government decided to just wait. Government figures show that an average of 117,000 vehicles a day use the cross-harbour tunnel. That's a 25-year low. Over at the Eastern Harbour Tunnel, there were 72,000 vehicles a day. The rationale is that putting up the toll at the Cross-Harbour Tunnel would bring an extra 5,000 vehicles to the Eastern Harbour Tunnel every day, and that's close to the tunnel's full capacity of 78,000 a day. The government hopes there will be more clarity in 3 years' time.
Because by 2017 we have the central Wan Chai bypass completed, we have already the return of the Eastern Harbour Tunnel to the government.
This cabbie says he would spend an extra $50 to use the Western Harbour crossing if he is in a real hurry. Otherwise, he would just put up with the traffic. This driver says there's not much traffic at the Cross-Harbour Tunnel as long as you get there before 7 a.m. So increasing the toll there would be bad news for him. A spokesman for the Automobile Association says although there are now fewer cars using the Cross-Harbour Tunnel than before, the traffic jams are still there. Whereas a few thousand more cars at the Eastern and Western Harbour crossings will still be bearable. Stanley Chang, chairman of the Lok Ma Chau China-Hong Kong Freight Association, says the government study was a waste of time. He believes the best solution is to charge the same toll at all 3 cross-harbour tunnels. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
A Hong Kong-bound Cathay Pacific passenger jet hit turbulence today and about a dozen people were injured. Flight CX-879 from San Francisco landed shortly before 6:30 this evening. Ambulances were already on standby at Hong Kong International Airport before the plane touched down, a Boeing 747. The airline says the plane hit turbulence near Hokkaido, Japan. And service along the MTR's East Rail link is delayed because of a problem with an overhead electric cable. Huge crowds packing onto platforms during the evening rush hour. The railway company has arranged shuttle buses to ferry passengers to their destinations. While there's a train going between Hong Kong and Tai Po Market every 5 minutes, services between Tai Po Market and Lo Wu, as well as Lok Ma Chau, are running at 20 and 30-minute intervals, respectively. The problem started at 4:20 p.m. when an overhead line insulator near Fanling Station broke up. The cable began dangling, and that triggered the safety system to cut off the power supply. Repair workers are scrambling to fix the damage.
Renewed clashes in Bangkok have left 4 people dead and as many as 60 injured. The violence erupted as riot police started rounding up demonstrators at various locations around the Thai capital. The battles come as the government of caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra faces mounting legal troubles. James Aiken brings us the latest.
It is the most determined effort yet to clear camped-out anti-government demonstrators from various sites around state offices. 15,000 security officers have been deployed to reclaim 5 protest sites across the capital. But the operation, dubbed Peace for Bangkok, has been anything but. Officials say a police officer is among the dead, with dozens of police officers and protesters injured. The most intense fights have centered near Government House. Protesters dug in after hearing that caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra intended to move back to the building. She's been forced to use a temporary office on the outskirts of Bangkok since protesters began an attempt to oust her late last year. The police operation comes a day before the civil court hands down a ruling on the government's declaration of a state of emergency declared last month. The declaration allows authorities to exercise wide powers to detain protesters and hold them in custody for 30 days without charges. But if the decree is struck down by the court, the government will be forced to dismantle the Special Security Command Center it has set up to enforce the emergency measures. Meanwhile, Thailand's anti-corruption body today filed charges against Yingluck over the government's rice buying scheme. Yingluck, who is head of the National Rice Committee, introduced the scheme to pay farmers above market prices for their grain. A spokesman for the National Anti-Corruption Commission says that despite warnings about corruption, evidence shows Yingluck continued with the scheme, causing massive financial losses to the government. She's scheduled to appear in court on February 27th. James Aiken, TVB News.
The scathing United Nations report has painted a grim picture of human rights in North Korea. It says the North's leader, Kim Jong-un, may be held accountable for crimes against humanity. But China has dismissed the report. Tony Sabine has more.
It's unusual for a head of state to be singled out. But that's exactly what a United Nations panel did over allegations of crimes against humanity in North Korea following a year-long investigation. The panel says the country's leader Kim Jong-un may be held accountable for crimes such as political prison camps, state-sponsored abductions and lifelong indoctrination.
Indicated that he should be aware of this. He should be aware of the international crime of aiding and abetting crimes against humanity, even if not himself involved in the actual perpetration of those crimes. And we informed him that he himself may be responsible in any subsequent prosecution that occurs.
Kirby said what's been happening in North Korea is comparable to Nazi-era atrocities. And the message to the world, act now.
At the end of the Second World War, so many people said, if only we had known the wrongs that were done in the countries of the hostile forces. If only we had known that. Well, now the international community does know. The international community will know. There will be no excusing a failure of action because we didn't know. We do know.
China today spoke out against the UN report. The foreign ministry in Beijing rejected what it called unreasonable criticism of its ally. A spokeswoman refused to say if China would use its veto powers at the Security Council to block possible action against Pyongyang. Japan, on the other hand, welcomes the report. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said Tokyo will work closely with other countries and the UN to follow up on the findings. And on the streets of Seoul, calls for change. This person hopes more people will now be aware of the lack of human rights in North Korea. Tony Saboin, TVB News.
Emergency crews in South Korea have been working through snow and sleet to pull survivors from the debris after an auditorium roof collapsed. 10 people were killed and 100 others injured when the roof of the building came crashing down last night. Most of the victims are recently enrolled university freshmen who had gathered for a welcoming ceremony. Weather officials say the region has been blanketed by the heaviest snowfall in years. South Korea's president has ordered an investigation as well as safety checks of other buildings in the region.
And this just in, MTR services have now returned to normal. A problem with an overhead electric cable was blamed for delays earlier. On to other news, 5 of 7 Japanese divers who went missing off Indonesia's resort island of Bali last Friday have been found alive. The 5 women were discovered by fishermen on a coral reef and rescued by boat. One of them was flown by helicopter to a hospital in critical condition. A search is still underway for 2 other missing divers. The group of 7, including 2 instructors, disappeared 4 days ago while diving off Bali's southeastern coast when strong winds and heavy rain hit the area. Hospital officials said the survivors suffered burns to between 30% and 90% of their bodies due to prolonged exposure to sunlight. All of them are now said to be in stable condition. And still ahead in our newscast. The CE condemns insults hurled at mainland visitors. Online shopping using the octopus card. And an artist charged with smashing a $1 million vase by Ai Weiwei.